Hi there, and welcome to the latest edition of Cool People. Now, over the last 2 years or so, since coming out very publicly as being transgender and doing lots of trans awareness training and public speaking and media appearances about being trans, I've met all sorts of amazing people with incredible stories to tell. And I decided that this was a really good opportunity to introduce you to some of my friends. And one of my friends is a man called Khakan Qureshi, and he's with me today, and he's an LGBT plus activist, a speaker, and a writer. And he's been on many TV programs recently, which I'm sure he'll sort of tell us about shortly. And he's been doing lots of amazing work. So welcome, Kaka.
Hello, Katie.
It's
Hello, how are you?
all right. It's just great to catch up finally, because we've been chatting on Facebook so much, and this is actually the first time we've actually had a chat to have had a chance to have a chat to each other face to face, isn't it?
It is, yeah, and it's a great opportunity as well to connect as well. And I think with the lockdown being what it is, it's enabled people to communicate a lot more than what we have done. So it's a really good way to connect with people out there.
Yeah, yeah, I think so. And because obviously we're recording this at the time of lockdown, during the coronavirus, and it's just, I think doing these chats via Zoom is just fantastic, because it is just getting that social interaction, but it's telling all these stories as well. And I think it's so important to be able to tell personal stories.
It is, and I think with my story as well, I've been out for a number of years now. I've been out for 28, 29 years.
Right.
And for me, it's, I want to see changes, but they're not happening as quick as I had hoped.
Yeah.
But I'm glad that they're happening in my lifetime and I'm not beyond that. Do you know what I mean? So,
Yeah.
I mean, in the last few years, particularly, there's changes for Muslim LGBT individuals and organisations.
That's right.
We have a lot more media presence now, which helps a great deal.
Yeah.
And people are really, really wanting to not only share their stories, but they want other people to listen as well.
I think so, yeah. So would you like to sort of take us back, to as far back as you'd like to, and then just to tell your story?
Well, can I first of all just say that yesterday, me and my partner celebrated our 28th anniversary.
Hey, well done.
That's a biggie for ourselves
Hey,
because I'm 50 now, and he's going to be 71. And when we
wow,
met back in the early 90s, I was 22,
wow,
he was 43, and I hadn't really been out that long at all.
yeah,
Um, to meeting him prior to meeting him, because I always knew that I was very, very different,
yeah,
even from a young age, from about the age of 3. I knew I was different, but I didn't know how different was.
right.
Obviously I realized a few years later, but for me it was quite difficult to come out because, one, I was quite shy anyway. I was a very shy, introverted little lad, age about 3, 4, 5, 6. um, and I spent a lot of time with my mom and my 2 sisters. And even though I come from a large Muslim family, I'm the youngest of 7. I didn't quite have that connection with the brothers and my father for whatever reason. Obviously,
Okay.
it transpired much later as to why that was, I feel. Um, but it was quite, trying to fit in, I suppose, was very difficult. Um, and not just because of my sexual orientation or my identity in that respect, but also because we were Muslims, and the people who I connected with more were people like Sikhs and Hindus.
Mm.
And I had a high number of Sikh and Hindu friends, but I didn't quite fit in with them because I didn't share the same faith or religion.
Right.
And then likewise with the Pakistani Muslims out there, I didn't quite fit in with them for whatever reason. A
Mm.
number of people used to say it's because of the way I looked, and I didn't present myself as looking very much Pakistani,
Right.
whatever that meant. So, um, yeah, it was quite difficult really because there was confusion in my head, but at the same time, I was a teacher's pet as well. I was doing really well with my grades at school, always wanting to strive for the best, really. And everyone said that you'll do something with your life, and what that is, I don't know. Um, but I think it also helps that with my mum, she enables me to express myself in whatever shape or form possible within the confines of structure and culture and community. Um, you know, even allowing me to sing Mamma Mia, Gloria Gaynor songs, ABBA songs, and not realising until much, much later that they became huge gay anthems.
Did you do
So
jazz hands as well?
I didn't do jazz hands.
Oh, you need to have the
As I
jazz
said,
hands.
as I said, I was quite a creative little individual, but at the same time, um, I was very, very quiet, and I didn't go out playing sports with my brothers or anybody else. And I think I was just somewhat lost and confused for a number of years
Yeah,
until, I was about 12 or 13. And then I realized then that maybe, if I am a pansy or a puffed or whatever it is that they wanted to call me at the time, maybe I was, but at the same time, in our culture, in our religions, it's deemed as haram or forbidden or a sin. So we had that as well, some level of religious guilt on my mind as well, to think, well, how can I be this way? Because if Allah wanted to create me this way, then I'm a sinner. And then it became much more vocal with people around me saying somewhat homophobic things and taunting me and teasing me, which didn't help matters either.
must be so
Um,
tough.
well, it was. I think at the time, we're looking at growing up in the 70s and 80s, and even though racism and sexism and levels of abuse were really high, I think we were much more robust and resilient. We just either kind of used to either ignore it or just carrying on with what we wanted to do, because otherwise we get ourselves into more trouble, and we had more concern about what our parents would think or what authority figures would say. Because at the time, for me growing up, I didn't want to get into trouble with the police or my parents.
No.
Um, I just wanted to be a good Muslim boy. That was
Yeah.
at the back of my mind all the time.
Yeah.
Uh,
So you and I are both the same age. So I remember, growing up as a kid in the 70s, and it was a scandal if anybody sort of came out as being gay back in those days, wasn't it? But being Muslim and gay as well is an extra pressure.
Yeah, as I said, whatever my parents wanted of me, I thought that I'll follow it through. If they wanted me to marry and try and have so many children, obviously I kind of respected that. And I thought, yeah, that's what I want to do as well. So that went on for a number of years, until I hit about the age of 16 or 17, when they started to broach the subject of getting married. And even though it might have just been hearsay at the time, or just my mom was just sort of vocalizing her ideas and aspirations for me.
Yeah.
I just thought this is a bit too much, really, because I wasn't quite ready anyway. I didn't feel that I was confident enough or mature enough to think about marriage. I hadn't even kissed a girl at that point anyway. But then had the opportunity to audition for a drama college in London. So I went off to a drama college. I auditioned, came back, thought nothing of it. And on the same day I came back to Birmingham, my brother said, "You've been accepted at the drama college and they want you to start the following week."
Oh, fantastic.
Yes, but it was fantastic at the time. But for me personally, it was quite traumatic, because it was a major upheaval coming from Birmingham in a close-knit family unit to going to London by myself, very much isolated, very, very much not knowing who I am, what I was doing, where I was going. So to me, it had a lot of stresses and led to depressions, anxieties. And also, I couldn't quite fathom how people were very confident in not only expressing themselves as theatrical people, but some people were very open about their sexual orientation and gender identity. And people were saying they were lesbian or gay or bisexual, or some people say we're not even giving ourselves labels. And bearing in mind, this is 1989,
Wow.
1990. So it was at the height of, HIV, AIDS, Section 28. So for me, having that sort of freedom of expression, it was a shock to my system. So I think I was somewhat conservative, more traditional, even though I thought I was liberal in one side. Having to face up to that, I just thought it was a shock to my system. Culture shock as well, because in the whole college there was 90 students, and there was 3 brown South Asians and a couple of other black people. And again, that was a big thing at the time, because not many people of colour would access the arts or have the opportunity to access the arts. So that was a lot to contend with as well.
Yeah.
So mine was full of on the one side, I had a lot of ideas about where I wanted my life to go. But on the other side, there was a lot of trauma and turmoil mentally and physically as well, socially,
Mm.
emotionally. Again, because I didn't feel that I fitted in with what was going on around me. Um, so it did lead to sort of suicidal ideation at some point. But that only happened after I slept with a couple of people.
Mm.
Um, and again, it was one of those things that I didn't know what to do with myself. I didn't know what to do with myself. I don't talk about it. Obviously, I've written about it, but actually talking about it and vocalizing is something different.
Okay. Yeah. Was it
You
sort of
know,
the guilt of it? You felt that culturally, it wasn't allowed. It was a bad thing, and was it that sort of conflict that?
it was. I mean, even after my very first one night stand, I came away and I thought, although it was quite an enjoyable experience, the other side is, it's embarrassing. I felt guilt. I felt an awful lot of shame. And I
Yeah.
thought, well, it was one huge sin. And
Mm.
bearing in mind, as I said, it was at the height of AIDS, Section 28.
Yeah.
And in my mind, all I kept thinking about, I don't know if you remember those AIDS adverts,
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
that it was a plague. So there was that, sort of culturally, there was that to contend with. But religiously, there was also the fact that, oh, if my parents ever found out, what would happen?
Mm.
So, and then I thought about because my father was a founder member of Birmingham Central Mosque,
Mm.
and him and my mother, they were really, really well known within the South Asian community. So obviously the grapevine will be talking.
Mm.
These are all scenarios I created in my mind. How would my brothers and sisters respond? How will my in-laws respond? Um, and it was constantly thinking about what would other people think. Um, so that didn't help at all. And then when I came back to Birmingham from London a couple of years later, I was trying to assert myself. I was 21, 22 years old. I started going out, and for my mum in particular as well, that was a shock to her because she said you went from being quite a decent, respectable young man, and suddenly you've started going out. And I was like, Mum, but I'm trying to assert myself. I've lived in London for a couple of years, uh, and I just needed to stand up on my own 2 feet as an adult. It didn't matter about my sexuality or anything. It was just me wanting to stand up for
Yeah.
myself and find my own independence.
Yeah.
Um, and then shortly afterwards, I met my partner. And again, that was kept quiet for a number of months, because I didn't realize at the time, to me, it was just an age barrier, because he was 43.
Mm.
Um, but afterwards, somebody said to me years later, they said, you broke all the taboos. And I thought, what do you mean? And they said, well, you're brown, he's white, he's got tattoos and he smokes and drinks, and you do none of those things. He likes clubbing it and you like to stay at home. So, and the fact that he's Church of England and I'm Muslim,
You,
you
you
know,
did. You smashed the lot, didn't you? You've
I
been it
think so.
big time.
So, but to me, all I thought about was like, oh my God, he's years older than me, and what would happen, a few years down the line if we ever stayed that long together.
Yeah.
But we stuck it out, and he said, "Be careful, be mindful. I understand how your culture is, and I'm really sensitive to that. So, are you sure you want to tell your parents about, you met someone?"
Mm.
Um, and I said, "Well, I just have to be really honest with my mum." So that's how it happened. That's how it happened when I sat down in the bedroom with my mum. Um, and she asked me, what's going on? Had I met somebody? And I said yes. And she was quite sort of, okay, that's understandable. Who is she? What's her name? So using the pronoun as well, it kind of made
Ooh.
me feel even worse than what I initially thought. And I kept saying, it's not a she, Mum, it's a he. And that's how it came out. I'd met somebody and I was in love with somebody of the same sex. So we had a really sort of deep, thoughtful, quite traumatic, quite emotional conversation.
Mm.
Um, and she was, I tell this in all my, I've written it down, I've talked about it a lot, is her words I carry with me all the time to say, whatever makes you happy makes me happy. And if I can't share in that happiness, what kind of mom will I be?
Oh, that's beautiful.
Yeah, so that's something that I hope that it inspired me to think, you know what, it was good that I had that relationship with my mom, because I'd always been honest and open with her over a number of things anyway.
Yeah,
So it was one of those scenarios where I thought, do I tell my mom or do I not? And
yeah,
whatever shape or form it takes, whatever the consequences, I'll have to face up to it.
yeah,
Because I was really fortunate that I had a partner who said, whatever happens, if you have to leave me, I'll support you on that decision. And
yeah,
if you stay with me as well, that's a bonus.
yeah,
And I think in hindsight, I think that was because of his maturity.
mm,
He was able to manage his emotions in that way.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah,
But I couldn't help my feelings towards him. They were a lot stronger than initially thought,
yeah, yeah.
you know.
But and incredible of your mum, though, especially the fact that your mum was very well known, in the Muslim community locally, and you know, it must have been taken an awful lot of strength for her to react as she did. I mean, all credit to her. That's amazing.
Well, I'm really fortunate that, I mean, I've lost both my parents now anyway, 10, 12 years ago. But as I said, in hindsight, I looked at my mum and the way she brought us all up, we were all quite free spirits in our own way. And how she allowed us to have the partners that we did was incredible as well. I mean, it's not just for me because I'm a gay man, but it started off with my elder sister who had some kind of, I don't know what do you want to call it, like a predestined marriage.
Right.
Like when she was born, in order to strengthen the relationship of my dad with his best friend, the best friend said, "Oh, if I have a son, he'll marry your daughter, so our bonds are stronger." And that's exactly what happened years later.
God.
Yeah. So, and then a couple of my brothers have married white women, and one of them is a Jewish woman.
Right.
And then my sister also had a love marriage as well. And even though with each partner, sorry, let me rephrase, with each one of my siblings and their partners, there's always been like the dynamics have changed within the family, obviously.
Yeah, yeah,
And it's knowing how my parents have reacted to it all. There's initial anger, frustrations, and then that's followed by sort of, whatever makes you happy.
wow.
Excuse me.
Yeah, all power to them, though. I mean, that's so lovely to hear. Amazing, amazing.
Well, as I said, I'm really fortunate. In fact, in terms of telling my story, and when I share it and I hear other people,
Mm.
I think I'm really, really fortunate that I had that type of parents.
Definitely.
And I had the blessings of both my parents eventually.
Yeah.
They met my partner, and they even said, out of all your siblings, you have the best relationship, you have the best looking home. It's a shame that you can't adopt to a foster.
Mm.
And bearing in mind, this is just a few years before it became legal for
Mm.
same-sex couples to adopt to a foster. So
Yeah.
that in itself was a breakthrough.
Yeah. 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 Absolutely. Yeah.
So yeah, I
Wow.
think I'm really grateful and thankful for both my parents being the way they were towards me and the rest of my siblings.
Yeah. Definitely.
You
And,
know,
and
uh,
and what led you to do the work that you're doing now? With the LGBT plus activism and public speaking and all that kind of thing.
well, I think even when I met my partner, and I always thought that I wanted to do something, but I think it was more about one. I thought at the time I was quite young, and there wasn't much call for like you say earlier, for brown people to come out and be open about it,
Mm.
especially here in Birmingham as well. And I thought things would have changed over the years, and I kept thinking I was becoming somewhat frustrated sometimes by the lack of resources, lack of services within the community, and even though I was learning to become more authentic within the workplace myself over the years, everyone says you're so open and out there. Why don't you do something with your life and inspire people to
Mm.
become a role model? And I just thought, life events. I've got my partner, I've
Mm.
got my commitments. I just need to do what I need to do. But it's unfortunate because part of it was my family, my siblings. Um, I didn't think that they would be. I always thought they were accepting of me, but one of my brothers, um, he gave me some kind of ultimatum a few years back, saying that the only way he'd have me back in the family home is if I split up with my partner and sell the house. And that only happened because at the time I'd lost my job. I was facing financial difficulties. I asked him for some support in that respect, which wasn't forthcoming. So I just thought, there's me thinking all my siblings are accepting of me, but the reality was they just tolerated me.
Mm.
So some of my, as I said, half the siblings they say they love me and accept me, but at the same time they're not really quite in agreement with me and my relationship.
No. And
So
is that still the case, or has things improved at all?
well, I've not seen my brothers for about 10, 11 years anyway now. But I've kept in touch with my sister. But as I said to you earlier, I've always had a close relationship with my sisters and my mom more than
Yeah.
anything.
Yeah.
And I got back in touch with my sister a few years back, so that's quite nice.
Yeah. Oh, that's good. Yeah.
But with my brothers anyway, as I said, there's no love lost in that respect, because even from childhood, even before I came out, we didn't have a strong relationship.
No.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. I've lost my sister, because of my transition. So she's very evangelical, born again Christian, and she doesn't want to know me. So, I do sort of understand. Yeah.
Yeah, but as I said, I'm more grateful for the fact that my sister is back in my life.
Yeah, that's good.
We've not actually met each other for a number of years, but we WhatsApp each other, send each other texts and things. So, and that's good.
Yeah. Oh, that's good.
Yeah. But I mean, obviously, that all happened after my mum passed away. So little things came to fruition at that time.
Yeah.
I just thought, do I stand independent, or do I sort of go back into the family fold?
Mm.
And I think sometimes it does play on my mind sometimes that, if you're experiencing loss or bereavement or whatever, you can be there for other people, but sometimes it's nice to hear somebody ask you, are you okay? Are you coping? And I think for me at that time, it wasn't forthcoming.
Mm.
So that was another reason why I stepped away, because nobody was looking out for me, and I was the youngest of the family.
Yeah.
And I just thought, are they going to do they show some concern or care for me? And I don't know if that's being selfish or what.
No. I mean, we all have times in our life when we do need a bit of care and we need a bit of TLC, don't we?
Yeah. So that's how it came about. And then around about the same time, funnily enough, I think there's contributing factors. Around about the same time, I joined IMAN, which is the Muslim LGBT social support group.
Okay.
Which were running for about 15 years at that point. And I was on their conversations on Facebook and trying to figure it all out. And I just said, is this appropriate for me at my age? Because a number of people seem to be quite young. And then one thing led to another. And somebody said, why don't you set up your own group as well? And I was thinking about it, and I was researching. And then on Facebook, there's another group called British Asian LGBTI. And I was the only one who was commenting on the posts. And then the administrator of that page says, look, rather than just comment, why don't you become an administrator as well? So, on social media, which is a wonderful thing sometimes, it can influence you to do things that you never thought possible, whether it's good or bad.
Yeah, definitely.
So, I joined this group, British Asian LGBTI, and I thought being online offering support isn't enough. I need something more in the community. I need that interaction. I was really missing something more tangible. So I contacted the Birmingham LGBT Centre and gave my idea to say, look, this is what I would like to do for a few months, see how it works out. They gave me the space, and I advertised Finding a Voice, which is my social support group for South Asians LGBT. Gave a time, gave a date, and allowed people to turn up once a month. 7 people turned up, which I call the Magnificent Seven, because they made it happen. Because when you're sitting there and you think, is there going to be anybody coming through the doors, yes or no? If there's 1 or 2 people, it's a bonus, especially from our community. 20, 30 years later, it's still the same nearly. People aren't being as vocal or as open about it as I would have hoped, but it's happening in a good way. Set up the group, watched it sort of blossom for a few months, and then I just thought, what can I do? I want to do something more than this. And then somebody recommended the Stonewall Diversity school projects, whereby you go in, you share your experiences with school kids. I did that for a while. So I'm still doing it, actually. And then somebody recommended diversity role models. I did that. And then before I knew it, somebody asked me to talk about it. Somebody asked me to write about it. So
things happen when you do stuff. Things happen.
it just galvanized from there, really.
Yeah.
And I even now I just think I want to, I want changes to happen at a faster pace than what they have been happening. So yeah, it just happened, and all of a sudden, some people are saying that I'm a huge role model, not only within the city of Birmingham, but across the UK as well.
You are.
Which is, yeah, but for me, it's just like I still have to get on with my life. I still go to work and I come home.
Exactly. Yeah, but you've been particularly busy in the last couple of years, haven't you?
Yeah, I think my profile raised considerably, simply because I was watching the news one evening, and there was a Muslim woman from a predominantly Muslim community in Birmingham, who came on the television and said that in the schools they're teaching the child to be gay, and in our religion it's not possible. And I just listened to that woman, and I just thought that complaint is going to be dealt with within a week or two. Somebody might take her aside and say, look, what you're saying is a bit homophobic or a bit discriminatory. We can't have that kind of talk here in either the school or the community, really. Because thankfully we have laws in place now which prevents homophobic, biphobic, transphobic abuse, or, words to that effect. And I just thought it'll end within a week or two and it'll be forgotten about. But I didn't realise it'll be start up a protest outside of the primary school. And I started tweeting about it, expressing my opinions, saying, what should be happening or what shouldn't be happening. And then the BBC picked up on that and invited me in to speak on The Big Question with Nikki Campbell.
Yeah.
And I just thought, let me do my stint, and then let me come away, and that'll be it. But the phone never stopped ringing at that point. And so I was in the media quite a lot for several weeks.
You were always on the telly at one point.
So I was on BBC, Channel 4, everywhere. So and then suddenly it exploded in a good way for me. But it also, the silver lining that I take is the fact that whether people agree with it or not, whether or not they agree with the fact that LGBT inclusive education is being taught in schools, I love the fact that the Muslim communities, or i.e. the faith-based communities, which never spoke about it, are now speaking about it.
Yeah.
And really fortunate for me that I received more support from straight Muslims than those who are protesting.
Yeah, and I think you often find this, that the protesters that are really anti whatever it is are a small group, but they're just very vocal, and so and the media likes to they like controversy, they like people arguing because it makes for a good telly or radio programs or whatever. And so they give them the airtime, but then the view is skewed towards them, because then they think, well, they're a bigger group than they really are, but they're not. In general, I think most people are nice people.
Well, I think this is what's happened here, because as I said, when I went along, and I'm born and bred in Birmingham. I lived and worked there most of my life. So when I went to actually visit the school, it really disheartened me, because I just thought, this is not the Birmingham that I know and grew up in.
No.
And these are not representative of all Muslims. No, but the media picked up on that, and they've kind of placed them under a microscope, as it were.
Yeah.
And saying, oh, look at the Muslim narratives, they're still sort of hardcore fundamentalists, etc. And I have spoken to a couple of their protesters, the two main lead protesters in particular, trying to make sense of where they're coming from. But some people are either on a mission, and they're either ignorant, or they don't want to listen, or they really have those thoughts in their mind that they can't shift.
No.
And it's a shame, because there are other people who are kind of sitting on the fence. And then there's people online on Facebook or Twitter who I'm having dialogue with them, and they're quite okay. And I just think to myself, if I was to meet you in real life, we'd probably get on quite well.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's just the fact that they brought up in a culture which says you cannot be gay or part of the LGBT community.
Yeah.
And I keep saying, but you know what? If you believe in Allah or God or whatever, who is supposed to embrace everybody and be inclusive of all human beings on earth, then you should do the same as well.
Yeah, exactly. And I think this is where, when you've been taking part in television debates and everything, I've seen you pitted against some of these Muslim fundamentalists who are just so anti-LGBT. It's brilliant because you can argue it from the viewpoint of, well, you are a Muslim, so they can't sort of say that. Is somebody say like if I was to try and argue against it, it'd be hopeless. It'd be hopeless because I'm not. Whereas you can, and I think, and the points that you argue are just so valid and so good. So, yeah.
Well, I think what we forget as well when we talk about this particular topic anyway is that those who are vehemently anti or appear to be very much anti-LGBT. If you dig deeper as well, some of these individuals would also be against music, for example, being taught in schools, or drama, or any form of creative expression as well.
God.
So that's sometimes how entrenched they are in that, they want to lead almost a very kind of simplistic mode of life. But we can't do that here in the UK because fortunately, we have freedom of expression and democracy, and freedoms that you don't have in other parts of the world.
No. And when they were talking about the program that they were complaining about was a program called No Outsiders, which was created by Andrew Moffat, and it's a brilliant program. It's been adopted by lots of schools, but a lot of schools have held back from doing it just because of these protests. Now I know they're going to have to from September because it's in law with the Equality Act 2010 that it's now sort of saying that they have to bring it in, which is such a brilliant thing. But so many, they could have brought it in sooner, but because of these protests, they didn't want the same sort of protests, and they thought, and so they pandered to these extremists and let them get away with it.
Well, I think that's the impression that they've given. Again, it's the media. The media has a lot to answer for, and I've made a number of media contacts now. And during the protests as well, I'd say, can you pick up on this narrative, and can you look at this point as well? And some of them have done it in their own ways, And the main point for me was the fact that children were not being talked to, and nobody seemed to be listening to the children. No. And that was the main point that I put across to one of the reporters. I said, whatever you do, can you please go out and speak to the children, and that will give you a good idea of whether or not their education is good or not. And when they went to, actually it's BBC Asian Network, they went out to Anderton Park and they listened to the children. They didn't talk about LGBT issues, but they just allowed the children to talk about their schooling. And they're absolutely fantastic, because what Sarah is teaching and what Andrew is teaching over at Parkfield is the fact that, people should be allowed to be themselves, whether you're black or white, disability or able-bodied or otherwise, and about colour and various aspects of life.
Yeah.
They're just saying that, colour doesn't have a gender, for example, like pink and blue.
No. And it's...
And about cooking as well, it's not a gender thing that you should be able to cook, and it's only for girls only. So they cross an awful lot of sections of life.
Yeah, and I think this is the thing with the No Outsiders. It's not teaching anyone to be gay or trans. Not that you could do that anyway. It's something you either are or you're not, and nobody chooses to be. But all it does is just shows that there are lots of different types of families, and some families have two mummies and two daddies. It doesn't. Some only have one mummy or one daddy, and yes, and it just shows that everybody's different, and just to accept difference. And I think that's what No Outsiders does. It's nothing it's nothing sinister, and that's all it is. And I think I really take my hat off to Andrew for creating it. And it'll be interesting to see what happens in September. Yeah.
Well, I'm hoping that, things can move forward on this as well. I know that Andrew has tweaked the program a little bit last year. He's calling it No Outsiders for a Faith Community.
Oh, okay.
So that's really good to start as well. But again, it's about what you said earlier, is about allowing people to accept difference. You
Mm,
know, I'm different to you, you're different to your neighbor, and all the rest of it. But it's unfortunate that this particular group of individuals within that community picked up on the LGBT aspect. And this is something that I come across time and time again.
mm,
That which element of the LGBT or the books in particular do they not like? And even
mm,
though they don't say it, I know for a fact that they object to the LGBT aspects, you know,
yeah.
and because they allegedly would say, my faith tells me this. So
Mm,
what I do now is when I go into schools, I ask the school children, it doesn't matter if they're aged 11, 12, 14 or 18-year-olds, how many of them have actually read the Quran
mm,
and they understand it, and which part of it talks about the LGBT aspects. And say that if there's a classroom or there's about 100 people, there's only about half a dozen people who say, "Oh, I've actually read it and understand it,"
mm.
and the rest of them say, "Well, we've read it, but we don't quite understand it."
Yeah.
So for me, it is a level of, you know, you're learning by rote, and it's just time and time again the scriptures are being either misinterpreted or they're not taking on the whole underlying themes and issues of the scriptures.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, I
So
think. Sorry, go on.
go on.
Yeah, I think. Well, I think it's great that you're sort of, countering those arguments and helping to educate people. I think it's brilliant the work that you're doing.
Oh,
Um,
thank you. I think for me as well, it's because when I was coming out all them years ago, learning about myself, I'd
mm,
heard so much about, you know, oh, the Quran says it's haram being homosexual and all this type of thing. I just had, I wouldn't say I had the opportunity. I think because I was going through my own personal trauma, what I did was I read the Quran to learn about, you know, what does it say? What does it exactly say? Why should I feel so guilty for
mm,
having these feelings for somebody of the same sex?
yeah.
Um, and then I read that, and then I read the Bible as well at the same time to cross-reference.
Right.
You know, and I just thought, you know what, the world puts itself in a spin over the slightest thing here, and there's no need to do that because they're missing the point of the Holy Scriptures. And the
Mm,
Holy Scriptures is all about being compassionate and accepting and being much more inclusive of one another.
yeah.
You know, all those sort of like moral values and guidance that we want in life anyway.
Mm, yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. So.
So, you know, and I just thought, you know, being attracted to or in love with somebody of the same sex, um, you know, I thought that's just another part of my being. You know, you need to look at my actions and my deeds and my thought patterns. It's not
Yeah.
like it's not like you and I are considering planning all the time, 24/7 to, you know, we're going to go out there and murder somebody, or I know I'm, you know, I'm being a bit extreme. Do you understand what I'm trying to say?
Yeah.
Is that,
Yeah.
you know, we still have to go out and we're trying to do good in our lives,
Absolutely.
you know, and how we identify or who we're attracted to is only one aspect of our being, and
Mm,
it shouldn't matter how people look at us or not.
yeah.
You know, everybody should carry on with in their own lives and doing the best that they can.
Mm, absolutely. Yeah. And you're certainly doing that. So yeah. Well done for doing everything that you're doing. I think it's absolutely brilliant. And
Oh, thank you. And
keep
I think the
doing it.
time that we're living in now with the lockdown and social distancing, again, the silver linings that I take from that is that social etiquette is
Mm,
coming back in some respects,
yeah.
about not being in your face, literally,
Yeah.
sort
Yeah.
of keeping a distance, being mindful now as
Yeah.
well as to how we're interacting, which is good.
Yeah. 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 Yes, it'll be interesting to see how things change. When we get back to whatever sort of normality we're left with at the end of this. But,
Yeah, I mean, even I mean, I'm digressing a little bit, but even like, you know, sneezing or coughing, people are much more mindful now, aren't they? Putting tissues in front,
mm, yeah.
you know, whereas before they
Yeah.
were.
No.
And I
Exactly.
think, you know, how we identify whether, you know, you're part of the trans community or brown, gay, whatever. Hopefully, I'm hoping again is that it won't be an issue now.
I hope so. I hope so. I hope it breeds some much more sort of tolerance. Well, not just tolerance, acceptance, because tolerance isn't great. Acceptance is the thing.
Yeah, and I
um,
think the ironic thing about this is that the NHS are using the rainbows prior to all this,
no.
so that they are huge LGBT allies.
Yes.
And now children are picking up on that, though, aren't they? And using it to say thank you to the NHS staff.
I know, yeah.
So that's the ironic thing about it. So these protesters, you know, who are protesting about No Outsiders, I don't know, you know, how they're going to respond to that. In fact, I think I might ask Shaquille, actually.
Your friend Shaquille.
Yeah, so what do you think about this then? You know, but you know, laughter aside is, you know, something we need to consider, isn't it? About
Yeah,
how do we move forward on this?
definitely.
You know, and September is not, it's only a few months away. And as you
Yeah.
said, this level of normality, whatever that's going to be, comes back in a better way.
Yeah, I hope so. Well, thanks ever so much for taking the time to talk to me, Khakan. It's been great to catch up with you. It really has, and thanks ever so much everyone for watching this episode of Cool People. I've got lots more people cool people lined up for future editions, so please look out for the next one.